When I served in the army, my brother stole my family and life. Hurt more than the wound. The feeling of your brother stealing your life is one that shatters the very core of your existence. It's a deep betrayal that I wouldn't wish on anyone. My name is John. I fought in Iraq, bravely paying my debt to my country. When I left for my deployment, I had a beautiful life, a loving wife, Lucy, and two wonderful daughters, Emily and Rosa. The girls were my world, the light that kept me going during those dark days. Even in the harshness of Iraq, the thought of coming back to my family was the only thing that sustained me. Leaving them was hard. Lucy cried as I kissed her one last time before boarding the military transport. Emily, my eldest, clung to me, her tiny hands refusing to let go, while Rosa, only 5 at the time, kept asking when Daddy would come back. The separation was brutal. Sadness lingered like a cloud over my heart, the constant anxiety of knowing that any day could be my last in the desert. But I knew I had to be there. My duty called, and like so many others before me, I answered. It was during a routine operation when everything changed. The air was thick with tension, the kind that clings to your skin, alerting you that something was about to go wrong. It did. An IED exploded near our convoy, the force of the blast sending me flying. I woke up in a hospital, my head spinning, confused, and in excruciating pain. My leg was gone, taken clean off below the knee. They told me I was lucky to be alive. At that moment, it didn't feel like luck. The post-op recovery was long, brutal, and draining. I had phantom pain where my leg used to be, and I grappled daily with the new reality of being incomplete. But what hurt most was the absence of my family. Lucy didn't visit, not once. I was recovering in a neighboring state just a few hours' drive from home, but she never came. She sent messages, sure. They were full of words of support and encouragement. "You'll be back to yourself soon, John. You're strong," she'd text. But none of her messages had the one word I was desperate to hear: love. The thought nagged at me, but I pushed it aside, chalking it up to stress. She was home alone with 2 kids while I was away at war. I convinced myself that Lucy was just overwhelmed and that when I got back, things would be fine. She was probably waiting for me to walk back through the door, leg or no leg, to wrap me in her arms and tell me that she was proud of me. Right? But when I came home, I wasn't greeted with a warm embrace. I wasn't even greeted by my wife. As soon as I opened the front door, I noticed something was off. Men's shoes, a size far bigger than my own, were resting by the entrance. There was a jacket casually thrown over the back of the chair in the hallway, and a strange cologne filled the air. My pulse quickened as my mind tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I limped my way into the kitchen, and there they were, my wife and my brother, Rick, standing side by side, smiling, laughing like some sort of twisted family photo. My brother was holding Lucy gently, his arm around her waist as they prepared lunch for Emily and Rosa, who were at school at the time. They didn't notice me at first, too absorbed in their domestic bliss. I stood there frozen, like a ghost in my own home. And that's exactly how I felt, like a ghost. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't part of this picture anymore. When Lucy finally noticed me, her face paled. She quickly moved away from Rick, but the damage was done. The scene was seared into my brain forever. My wife, my brother. The betrayal was as raw as the pain of losing my leg. Rick had the audacity to speak first. "John, I didn't expect you home so soon." I couldn't find the words. I couldn't find anything. My heart was racing, but my body was numb. I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand answers, but all I could manage was a choked whisper. "What the hell is this?" Lucy stepped forward, guilt etched on her face. "John, it's not what you think." Not what I think? It was exactly what I thought. My wife had moved on. Not just moved on. She had moved on with my brother. The person I trusted with my life had taken everything from me while I was away fighting for my country, for our future. The conversation that followed was a blur of anger, tears, and accusations. Lucy tried to explain. We never planned for this to happen, it just did. Rick was there for me when you weren't. Each excuse stung more than the last. I had lost my leg for this family, and while I was out in the desert, bleeding and broken, Rick had been cozying up to my wife. My brother was quieter, more ashamed. At least, that's how it seemed at first. He kept saying things like, "It wasn't supposed to go this far," or "I'll move out today." But there was something about the way he said it that made me want to hit him. It was like he had already won and now he was just trying to do damage control. I kicked him out that day. I wanted to kick Lucy out too, but the thought of my girls, Emily and Rosa, kept me from making any hasty decisions. They were innocent in all this. They didn't deserve to have their lives torn apart because their mother had betrayed me. But deep down, I knew it was over. There was no going back to how things were. Every time I looked at Lucy, all I saw was betrayal, pain, and the cruel reality that I had lost my family while I was fighting to protect it. The weeks that followed were a nightmare. Lucy and I tried to keep things civil for the sake of the girls, but there was nothing left between us. We were two strangers living under the same roof. She spent more and more time out, claiming she needed space. I didn't push her. I was too tired to fight anymore. All I cared about was Emily and Rosa. Then one morning, I woke up to find that Lucy was gone. She hadn't just left for a walk or an overnight trip. She had packed her bags and vanished. On the kitchen table was a note, hastily scribbled, that read, "John, I can't do this anymore. I'm not the person you need me to be. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Please don't try to find me." There was no mention of Emily or Rosa, no concern for how they would cope without their mother. She had just left, abandoned her family without a second thought. I sat there, staring at the note for what felt like hours, trying to wrap my mind around what had happened. Lucy was gone, just like that. The first few weeks without Lucy were brutal. Emily and Rosa were confused, hurt, and angry. I was still recovering from my injury, struggling with physical therapy and the emotional toll of being left behind. But I had no choice. I had to be there for my girls. I had to be strong, even though I felt anything but. Rosa, who was only 7 at the time, would often ask, "Where's Mommy? Is she coming back?" And every time I'd have to look into her big, innocent eyes and tell her that I didn't know. Emily, older and more perceptive, stopped asking after a while. She understood in a way that broke my heart. She knew her mother wasn't coming back. Life became about survival. Getting through each day was a battle. I had to juggle physical therapy, work, and raising 2 young daughters on my own. But in the midst of all the chaos, something unexpected happened. I found strength. It wasn't easy. Some days I wanted to give up. I wanted to let the bitterness consume me, to blame Lucy and Rick for everything. But I couldn't afford to do that. My daughters needed me. So I got up every morning, put on my prosthetic leg, and faced the day head on. I learned how to braid Rosa's hair, I helped Emily with her homework, and I cooked meals that were often more burnt than edible. But we made it work. The funny thing about adversity is that it shows you what you're really capable of. I had spent so much time feeling incomplete because of my injury, feeling less than whole. But as the months passed, I realized that I was more complete than I had ever been. Losing a leg hadn't made me less of a father, and being abandoned by Lucy hadn't made me less of a man. It wasn't just the girls who gave me strength, though. I had help along the way from unexpected places. My neighbor, Susan, a retired nurse, became an invaluable part of our lives. She would drop by with casseroles or offer to watch the girls when I had physical therapy appointments. She had an endless supply of energy and a wicked sense of humor that kept us all laughing, even on the worst days. One evening, after Susan had brought over yet another homemade lasagna, she plopped down at the kitchen table with me. I was struggling to finish paying bills while Emily and Rosa were getting ready for bed upstairs. You look like you need a break, John, Susan said, her sharp eyes catching every ounce of fatigue etched on my face. I smiled weakly, shuffling the stack of bills to the side. I'm fine, Susan. Just trying to keep everything together. She sighed, crossing her arms over her chest. You don't have to do this alone, you know. You've got me, and the girls have you. You've come this far, but you've got a long road ahead. And there's no shame in asking for help. Her words hit me like a jolt. For so long, I'd been carrying this weight on my own, trying to be strong for Emily and Rosa, trying to push through the pain of losing Lucy and the betrayal from Rick. But she was right. I did have help. I wasn't alone. Susan leaned closer, her voice softer now. I know it's hard. What Lucy did, what your brother did, it's unforgivable. But you're still here, and you're still the father those girls need. No one can take that from you. I nodded, unable to speak. It had been so long since anyone had said something like that to me. Most people tiptoed around the subject, afraid to bring up Lucy or Rick, afraid to touch the rawness of what had happened. But Susan, in her own blunt way, knew exactly what I needed to hear. Over the weeks, she became more than just a neighbor. She was like a second mother to the girls, helping them through the tough questions and the emotional toll of losing their mother. Emily, in particular, grew close to her, confiding things she didn't feel comfortable telling me. "Mommy's not coming back, is she?" Emily asked one night as I tucked her into bed. I froze for a second, taken aback by the question. "No, sweetheart. She's not." Emily nodded, her face stoic in that way children sometimes wear when they're trying to protect themselves. She looked up at me, her eyes reflecting the sadness of a child far too young to understand why someone they love could just disappear. "But you're here. That's all that matters." I swallowed hard, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. "I'll always be here, Emily, no matter what." Life carried on, and slowly but surely things started to change. The girls and I developed our own routine. We'd go to the park on weekends, make terrible attempts at baking cookies, and have movie nights where Emily would pretend to be too old for Disney, but then secretly get caught singing along with Rosa. Work was tough. Returning to the office with a prosthetic leg wasn't exactly a smooth transition, but I was lucky enough to have an understanding boss and co-workers who supported me. Still, I found myself struggling to balance everything. Between work, physical therapy, and taking care of the girls, I barely had time to catch my breath. That's when Rick came back. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, one of those rare moments when both Emily and Rosa were content playing outside, and I could sit down with a cup of coffee and enjoy a moment of peace. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it, there he was, my brother, the man who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "John," he began, his voice strained, "we need to talk." I stood there frozen, staring at him as if he were some sort of stranger. In many ways, he was. This wasn't the brother I'd grown up with, the one who had stood beside me through thick and thin. This was the man who had taken my wife, my family, while I was off fighting for my country. "There's nothing left to say, Rick," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, but he shook his head. "I know I've screwed up. I've done things that I can't ever undo. But I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness." "Then why are you here?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Lucy left me too. She took off a few months ago. I haven't heard from her since." There was a long silence as I processed what he'd just said. It was strange. Part of me felt vindicated, like some cosmic justice had been served. But another part of me, the part that remembered the old Rick, the brother I once loved, felt pity. "I'm not asking for a second chance, John," Rick continued, his voice quieter now. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it." I stared at him for a long moment, searching for the right words. I didn't want to forgive him, but I also didn't want to carry the weight of anger anymore. I had Emily and Rosa to think about now, and they needed a father who wasn't consumed by bitterness. "Go live your life, Rick," I said finally, stepping back and closing the door. "We're done." Time went on, and I threw myself completely into raising Emily and Rosa. It wasn't easy. Single parenting never is. But I found joy in the little things. Watching Rosa ride her bike for the first time, seeing Emily win her first spelling bee, helping them with homework, comforting them after nightmares, and listening to their endless stories about school and friends. My daughters were growing into strong, beautiful young women, and I couldn't have been prouder. Every day was a new challenge, but also a new reward. We had built something together, the three of us. Something stronger than the betrayal that had torn our family apart. I never expected to become the sole parent, especially after my injury. But that's what happened. I didn't want to be seen as a hero. I was just a father, doing what I had to do. It wasn't always perfect, and there were days when I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. But in the end, the love I had for my daughters carried me through. And Susan? She stayed a part of our lives. She wasn't just a neighbor anymore. She was family. She'd come over for Sunday dinners, help with school projects, and occasionally babysit when I had late-night work meetings. She had become a surrogate grandmother of sorts, a constant, stable presence in the girls' lives. Years passed, and just when I thought our story had found its rhythm, life threw another curveball. It was Emily's high school graduation. The ceremony was perfect, bright, sunny, and filled with that mixture of pride and sadness that only a father can feel watching his little girl grow up. As we took pictures afterward, I noticed someone standing at the edge of the crowd. It was Lucy. She looked different, older, more tired. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Pity? Emily saw her too, and I could see the mix of emotions in her eyes. Lucy didn't approach. She just stood there, watching from a distance, before eventually turning and walking away. That night, as we sat down for Emily's celebratory dinner, I realized something important. Lucy's chapter in our lives was over. She had left us, abandoned her responsibilities, and while it had hurt deeply, we had survived. More than survived. We had thrived. I didn't need closure from her, and neither did my daughters. Now, as I sit on the porch watching Rosa and Emily laugh together, I can't help but reflect on how far we've come. I may have lost a leg, a wife, and a brother, but what I gained was so much more valuable. I have two beautiful, strong daughters who know what it means to love and to be loved. I learned to let go of anger, to find peace in the family I've built, and to embrace the life I never expected. There's a certain beauty in the unexpected, in the way life forces you to grow when you think you can't. And as the sun sets, casting a golden light over the yard, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. Not for the betrayals or the hardships, but for the strength that came from them. For the love of my daughters, and for the new family we created together. Because sometimes, the most beautiful things grow from the deepest pain.